All right. So MTF, you're gonna have to do a little work on this. Let's see that up up down state for P. I like the PUV in a box, but it's kind of over redundant. KT is a bit redundant, and that little I equals P equals E over T bit. I could probably drop all three of those over. Pull Boltzmann back one, leave the middle section, pull up NP into the bottom right of the 3x3, and instead of doing I equals P equals E over T for lambda, I would imagine you would want to do that over the emission spectrum. Now, I'm not really sure whether it goes back or it goes forward. It should be symmetrical. I'm sure that there's, because of it, some type of quark state like that where P and V are what is up and what is anti up, because to find P, to find V, in order to find T, you're going to need to have some kind of KT black body problem to find one for you. And you'd probably want to take what is PV over T as far as the Boltzmann constant there that I'm defining for it, and you might want to integrate that to the ground state 100, or wave function 100 for the ground state in the proto seed for the standard model. The ground state wave function 100 equals parentheses pi a 30 matrix parentheses -1 over 1/2 e negative 1/2 e minus r over AO, or A0, or the smaller radial, the here in this case a square law to what wave signals electromagnetism is going to do. The what would it be, cosmic, gamma, X-ray, UV, visible, infrared, microwave, VHF, UHF, shortwave, long wave. And if you want, I'm not really sure about the middle wave, and I wanted to do a lot more stuff with the kilohertz and stuff like that, but as long as we get a piece of the PVPT and I get a chance to pull that over in chemistry, well, it'll be like, you ever watched a physicist do Bohr model or something like that? They'll start writing it out, and you're sitting there freaking out, and the next words that they say are on that bell curve, right? Because that's the emission of the photon. When you're in a field charge, and I'm going to give you a lecture like this about black body, yeah, as A-level physics, he left that Celsius number in there when it's clearly negative 273 Kelvin, because Kelvin can be determined to nanometers, and nanometers or picometers can be determined into what is intensity or frequency. And so that all works out, but there's a whole standard model alphabet to that kind of stuff. I'm missing into this, but as long as we get that E equals mc squared fundamental feature of it, well, then trying to find states like Avogadro's number in the LED spectrum, or because you have high pressure sodium or high intensity discharge lights, that you're arguing those ratios. I have a colder temperature. I live in the northern hemisphere, and it's more for an agro corn, lettuce, or whatever else you're growing in your homestead. Well, that's a fair application for what it is under the constitutional law of those spectrums, if you will, or electromagnetism wave functions, and their measure, how they cross over each other, causing interference with each other that drops back that ultraviolet catastrophe, instead of just causing a heat death and getting roasted by ultraviolet radiation, not having the atmosphere as a lens to push it through, because it's all in a way light and things like that. It just acts different on which side of K or T that you're really living. And again, that wave function emission, I thought that was a cool way to draw it. That way you're not using A-level physics is just kind of like it can happen like that in a vacuum of space, that those rays could be hitting each other. They could have initial momentum or born momentum, if you will, but when, things are going to be right hand rule presented that way, so hydrogen and hydrogen collisions, up P and up V has relative nature to where it's positioned as visible light, right? Like that's the nanometers I need. So if it is what is up, the conventional model, then I need the potential or the power behind it to determine its frequency, and that's its velocity. And to multiply those things, give me that 0 times 0 type of thing, or 1 type of 1, that's going to give me 1 meter wavelength, or a 10 meter wavelength accordingly. And inside of there, it's not exactly a perfect spectrum. It's a little bit doped. There's things that cross over unless you're doing a lot of things to truly purify or cut by numbers, if you will, when grinding a D20, for example. But again, that's something to consider. If you can get it back down into the 3x3, drop Boltzmann over the snowflake, one to the left, and raise the NP emissions, the photon emission of that, and integrate the I equals P equals E over T on that line for emissions, because it would make sense to the intensity that it is. And when we get into the substrate solution and the nutrient solution of the clay technique and watering solutions later, we'll get more into whatever will be left off here. So keep that in mind. A little bit of that probability distribution with 3 different means for a standard deviation. And that's a probative, non-degradative TI theory. So